Hi, Susan. How are you?
I am great. Good to see you.
Nice. Remember, ask me anything. Happy
I
to take.
love it. I love it. I love that about you. We're live on Facebook too. I didn't tell you we're going to do that, but we had sort of a limit on this Zoom amount, and so we're live there for anybody on the alumni Facebook page. Well, great. I see that it is 6 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. I see that we've got lots of people joining us, and I can't tell you how excited I was all day today to have this event because I have so missed being around the country at our Sewanee Club events, seeing all of you. And what we would typically be doing is taking our Vice Chancellor around. And I think if there's a silver lining, it's that this event tonight, so until we can be together, I'm so glad you all want to be with us tonight, but we can open it up to everybody. And so if you live in Salt Lake City, for example, we probably weren't going to have a Sewanee Club event there, but tonight you're going to get to meet our Vice Chancellor, our new leader, and I just cannot wait for you all to meet each other. We have told him all about our awesome alums who are so loyal and supportive, and you guys are just going to fall in love with our new Vice Chancellor. And so what we're going to do tonight is you guys, when you registered, you had a chance to ask some questions. And so I have a lot of those laid out here. And so after I introduce him, I'm going to start asking some of those questions to him. And I think it's going to allow you all to get to learn his vision for Sewanee, but also get to learn, just to see a little bit, learn a bit about him and his personality, and just get to know him. So I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm so glad you guys are here. So we are joined, and I'm so excited, by our 17th Vice Chancellor, Reuben E. Brigety. And I'm going to introduce him real quickly. He is a native Southerner from Jacksonville, Florida, and his life and distinguished career has taken him from the U.S. Naval Academy to the University of Cambridge, and from Africa to Washington, D.C. And in selecting Ambassador Brigety to serve as our Vice Chancellor, the search committee found that he's uniquely positioned, as he put it, to bring Sewanee to the world and the world to Sewanee. He's the former dean of the Elliott School of International Affairs at the George Washington University and the former U.S. ambassador to the African Union. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and holds a master's degree in philosophy and a PhD in international relations from the University of Cambridge. He's joined in Sewanee by his wife, Dr. Leli Selassie, and their two sons, Robel and Retta. Welcome to Sewanee, and I'm so glad you're here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
You forgot the dog. We're joined by
the dog. That's in my questions. So I think for the first question, I'd love to ask you, and a lot of people, they just had a lot of curiosity about you personally, but can you just first off tell us how you came to Sewanee, how the search committee found you, and your first impressions of Sewanee?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Susan, and good evening, everybody in cyberspace. I'm sorry that I can't see you, but I'm thrilled that you're here with us in any event. And as Susan mentioned, we're all learning new things in the context of our new COVID normal, and the chance to be able to do this via Zoom hopefully will help us to bridge the gap in the miles. So, as you mentioned, I've been Dean of the Elliott School of International Affairs for 5 years, and the Elliott School is the largest school of international affairs in the United States. It's bigger than Sewanee, just the Elliott School itself, by a lot, by almost 50%. And so when you have been Dean of a place like that for 5 years, and you haven't been fired, then what starts to happen is that search firms start to come by and say, so are you interested for the next thing? And I knew that I was ready for the next professional step. And I was in conversations with a number of institutions, both academic and non-governmental institutions, all to be a chief executive or a president. And then, pretty far along that process, I got a call from the search firm asking me if I were interested in Sewanee. Now, I'd heard of Sewanee from being from Jacksonville and whatnot. I have friends that have graduated from here. Some of you may know Marcel Lettre and Jason Forrester. But I had never been here. And so, to be frank, the very first thing I asked the search firm when they asked me about I was interested in Sewanee, first thing I said was, are they ready for a Black president? So they're not ready, they're not coming. And they said, no, we think they're ready. Then I said, all right, well, the next thing is, do you simply want me in the candidate pool to make sure you have a certain level of diversity? Because if that's what you want, I'm not interested either, because I'm pretty confident in my credentials. They said, no, we think you're pretty good. So I entered the process, which is very, very competitive, as you no doubt know and suspect. And the more that I learned about it, the more, a few things happened. I mean, the first is I felt like I got it, right? I mean, I'm a Southerner. I understand that culture that we all either were born in or came to understand by virtue of your time here in Sewanee on the mountain. I get it intuitively, as well as understanding important aspects, factual aspects of our history. I certainly understand the Oxbridge connections, having done my PhD at Cambridge. I'm a person of faith. I'm a Presbyterian, not an Episcopalian, which quite frankly, I think was a higher bar to climb over than the fact that I'm African-American. To be Vice-Chancellor Sewanee, but we're making it work. I'm an almost Episcopalian. That's a whole other story we can get to later in the talk if you're interested. And I am, I'm an educator in my bones. Interestingly, there are a couple of things that are kind of core identities about me. I mean, one is that notwithstanding the fact that I'm no longer in the Navy, haven't been for years, I'm still very much an officer in the sense that I thrive off of bringing people and resources together to achieve a common vision. There are some people that, and particularly in academia and higher education, it's like the last thing they want to do, right? Just let me do my research, write my books, teach my students, don't bother me with any other sort of stuff. I really am passionate about it. I'm passionate. I'm also a fourth generation educator. My mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother were all teachers. I thrive off of helping young people achieve their destiny. We're a big scouting family, so the fact that the domain is the domain was a huge plus to me. I've also volunteered to be the scoutmaster for Troop 14 at SAS, effective January. And in fact, I actually just had an email exchange with the National Chief Executive of the Boy Scouts of America today, try to figure out how we can establish some partnerships between Sewanee and the BSA that could be mutually beneficial. At any rate, so it all just kind of like made sense to me, and it felt like a calling. And I am a principle-driven person. All things being equal, I'm all about doing things for a common mission. And so, with all that, when I made it through the process and I shared my vision for the university with the search firm, with the hiring committee, I was elected by the Board of Trustees on February 28th of this year.
Well, we are so glad that all happened. So thank you and welcome. And so you just touched on your vision, and do you mind to share your priorities and what you kind of picture that maybe the next couple of years will look like?
Sure. So as you all know better than I, Sewanee is a very special and unique place. It has for generations produced thousands of people who've enjoyed and matriculated and grown here on the mountain together, and then have gone off in the world to do things of consequence. Here's the thing. As special and as unique Sewanee is, it does not exist in a vacuum. We are part of a network of some 3,000 plus institutions of higher education, and we are about to enter the most competitive environment in the history of American higher education. If you're not in this day to day, you wouldn't know this, but there is something called the demographic cliff that is coming within the next 5-6 years. Basically, people stopped having babies at the same rate during the 2008 financial crisis. In the first cohort of those babies, who will be 18 in 2026, will be 15 to 20% smaller as a group than previous cohorts before them. And not all of them are going to go to college. And we're still not clear what percentage of that 20%, if it will mirror the college going percentage as years pass. And so what that means is that most institutions, on average, have to presume that they will be pursuing a graduate pool that is 15 to 20% smaller than they've relied upon in years past. And that will also be the most ethnically diverse group of young people ever to apply for college in American history. Now, here's the kicker. Not all schools are going to be negatively impacted or impacted the same way. The best schools by category, best four-year comprehensive privates, Harvard, Dartmouth, best four-year public flagships, University of Florida, University of Tennessee, they will be fine. And by best, you're talking about top 25-ish. Everybody else is going to be in a knife fight. Sewanee in the latest U.S. News and World Report rankings was number 47 amongst the largest colleges in the United States. And by the way, that is 4 points lower than we were last year, number 43. And it is the bottom of a 20-year slide in the rankings for us that was as high as number 23 in 1998. Even as many of our peer institutions have surpassed us and gotten better. So 47 is a very dangerous place to be. Now, I know that it's not all about the rankings. I get that. I also know that both rankings don't measure everything. There are a lot of things that the rankings don't measure about Sewanee. They don't measure the beauty of our 13,000 acres. They don't measure the sense of community and family bonding. They don't measure some of our traditions, which are unique to us. But they do measure some things that are actually really quite important. Everything from student success, graduation rates, retention rates, student-teacher ratio, affordability, social mobility, all those sorts of things. And these are things that an increasingly discerning cohort of young people and their families are looking for. And crucially, if you actually sort of break down the data, our 47 ranking, if you kind of break down and look at some of these specific categories, all of which have to do with student success, both the student quality of the students we're bringing in, the graduation rate, the retention rate, all those things around student success. There are literally dozens of liberal arts colleges in the United States that are doing better at this than we do. And so not only to address them as a matter of our ranking per se, but addressing them because improving all those things will actually improve the overall student's experience and therefore help us do better by our commitment to the students we bring in. Because anytime a student comes to us, we are automatically invested in them. So we need to focus on that. And also, as we look towards this decreasing group of young people, it's also very important that we think really quite strategically about our budget and find other sources of revenue to support our core academic mission. So the three, as I've briefed here, both the regents as well as our faculty and staff, the three kind of immediate actions that we have to do on an urgent priority basis is dramatically improve what we are doing with regard to student success on those sorts of metrics that I just talked about. The second thing that we have to do is that we have to get dramatically better on matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of great work has been going on here for many years, but we actually need to take that to another level now. It's time, past time, arguably. In the year 2020, the University of the South is 86% white in its undergraduate population. This in the context of a region, our home region, the American South, that is home to 60% of the country's African Americans, that is home to the largest percentage, fastest growing percentage of Latinx students. America is changing, and it simply does not look like we look here at the University of the South. And the thing is, diversity begets diversity. So we have to work harder, both to get and encourage students who are fantastic students of color, but who for whatever reason may not feel particularly comfortable coming here, to tell them they should come. We want them here. because it's not only sort of helpful for them, it's also helpful for our white students, so they can help to forge those kinds of close-knit relationships here on the mountain, across ethnic lines and religious lines that will follow them for the rest of their lives. And again, as I say, it's actually really important for us to do that in order to be competitive for the best students that we're going to be seeing in the coming years. The third thing is that we have to get much smarter about alternative sources of revenue beyond the tuition that comes from our undergraduate population, whether that be thinking really quite critically about other sorts of graduate programs that we could develop, which could generate other net tuition revenue, or other sort of things like, for example, the Sewanee Village project, which has been going on for a while now, but that we need again to turbocharge to help us find ways to bring additional sources of private sector revenue, which also will help to generate other forms of activity that make our collective life here better. Now, some of you may have heard me talk about a year of discernment, which I very much want to do. And we've had our colleague Celeste Kruger out of Jacksonville, Florida, who was here all this week, kind of doing sort of a listening tour, and who will facilitate the year of discernment for us. And at the end of the week, she told me, Vice Chancellor, everybody here is exhausted. Now, I didn't need an outside consultant to tell me that everybody's tired. That's pretty clear. But it is true that COVID is taking a real toll on our community. I mean, I think we've gone pretty straight through from the time we had to evacuate the mountain in March, and everybody's looking forward to a long break in November. And so in the spring, what we hope to do is have a series of listening circles for people just to begin to listen to each other, process the vision the new Vice Chancellor is bringing into process, what we've learned over this COVID semester, and to set the groundwork for what will be a year of discernment over 2021, 2022. They'll be focused on 5 key pillars that will mirror some of the things I just talked to you about as urgent actions that we have to take. The first is preeminence in our undergraduate mission, for preeminence in our educational mission, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, for reasons that I just told you, that our strategy for institutional survival depends on our punching up, so that we are indisputably, objectively one of the best top 25 schools of our kind in the country. The second is focusing on diversity and difference for reasons I just mentioned. The third is something that I call Sewanee Global, which is the idea that Sewanee should be the Aspen of the South minus the skiing, that we should work harder to intentionally be a place that convenes conferences and concerts and convenings of other sorts to encourage people to come and engage on these really important, interesting issues of the day, all with the distinctive Southern flair, which helps to both introduce people who are not familiar to Sewanee, and also adds to the whole issue of alternative sources of revenue, as I mentioned. The fourth is the sustainable economic development of the domain. How do we preserve and extend our natural inheritance while also making sure that we're being smart and limited about the much smaller portion of the domain that we can develop for purposes of both the needs of our community, whether it be the additional housing units to additional retail and things of that nature. And the fifth has to do with wellness, and that is, how do we help our community and the individuals in our community, in particular our students, make healthier choices with regard to substances, alcohol and drugs, and with regard to relationships, particularly in matters of sexual assault. Because there comes a time when the accumulation of individual choices comes to impact and define our collective character. The number one reason documented while really good students who have been admitted to Sewanee do not come here is because the so-called party culture. Within the top 2 or 3 reasons why really good students leave is because they don't find a fit with the party culture. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to turn Sewanee into a convent. I have no issue with people getting together and having a good time responsibly and in accordance with the law. But we have some issues here that are linked to issues of substances, and we need to have a very brave, open conversation about them and help our students understand the series of consequences associated with them, and help us to begin to develop alternative narratives about our collective life here together.
Thank you for that great insider's information for our alums. I know many of those pillars will resonate with them. So as everybody knows, the start of your leadership here was not the start you expected. And so can you share with everyone how COVID has just had to catapult you into a new mode of operation, and what that looks like here as far as testing goes, and visitors, and a lot of protocols, and might be the effects on the budget?
Sure. Well, so first of all, notwithstanding whatever one may hear in the media or whatever, this virus is real, it's deadly, and it's ugly. My wife is an ICU physician, so she was a frontline general in the fight against COVID in the National Capital Area region before we moved here. It was like combat for her and her colleagues for 6 months, and still is for those that are still fighting this horrible disease. The entire hospital was turned into an ICU ward for several months because the flood was so significant. We've lost 3 members of our family to this disease, both here in the United States and one in Ethiopia, my wife's side. It's horrible, and young people can get it and they can spread it. And so obviously the question is, how do you have a residential college experience in the midst of a pandemic this deadly, the likes of which our country has not seen in a century, and that is literally of biblical proportions? The good news is that the team here on the mountain, across the board, from the faculty to the dining staff, from our newly hired public health officers to our athletic coaches and everyone in between, is really, really pulled together. And we are, touch wood, well over half the way through the semester. I joke, sort of, that I considered, consulting a bookie in Vegas back in August about whether I should bet short or long about how long we're going to be able to stay open. And I think anybody could be forgiven for not plausibly thinking that we'd be able to stay open this long, because quite frankly, a lot of colleges have not. So what's made us the difference? Well, it's not that we are inherently on a mountain and that Sewanee is inherently kind of protected by our Sewanee Angel, our Legion of Sewanee Angels, and the cache of vibranium that is hidden away under the at All Saints Chapel. The virus could take hold here just as much as it could anywhere else. In fact, neighboring Grundy County has one of the highest incidents of coronavirus in the entire state of Tennessee. It is ruby red on the coronavirus map. What's done it for us is the following. The first is that we have developed a first-in-class testing regime in partnership with a lab in Chattanooga, Baylor Labs, which allows us to test essentially the entire student body once a week and have the individual results back within 6 hours. It's incredible. Testing has proven to be so useful and so important that we are going to make the investment and build our own lab here on campus, which we hope will be operational in January, which at a minimum will allow us to have our own capacity, allow us to be able to test at the current rate with our own capacity at a less cost. And worst case and best case allows us to double our testing capacity entirely, continuing to work with Baylor. So that's been extraordinary. We have some pretty significant public health guidelines as well. The domain is officially closed to non-official visitors. What does that mean? It means that alumni and parents need to not visit the mountain while the semester is in. I know that has not been popular, but it's been essential and one of the reasons why our rates are so low. But it also means that we made the very difficult decision to allow prospective students to come visit with one family member during the visitation period. Now, the reasonable question to ask is, how could you plausibly do that? Isn't it different? Well, there are 2 very important reasons why we made that decision. The first is that a university is a going concern. And you just heard me outline to you the incredibly challenging environment that we are going to be heading into with regard to student recruitment, which is hard under any circumstance. And so we know that for something like 40% of our students, the first time, 22% of our students, the first time they have any interaction with Sewanee is when they actually come to visit, and that visiting here to kind of get a sense of the mountain is absolutely essential for converting student applications to student commitments to come to Sewanee. So our ongoing future as a university depends on our finding a responsible way to invite students to come and check us out. And so we have developed a very strict protocol in which that will happen. One student, one family member, they have to be masked. They will not interact with any of our students while they're here. They won't go into the dining hall. They won't go into residence halls. They won't go into classrooms. The only building they'll be able to visit is All Saints Chapel. But they will get a sense of the place. They'll see students walking around. They'll see our tented outdoor classrooms to give a sense. They'll see students walking around with masks. All that is important. We've also prevented students from leaving the domain, except for very limited circumstances and with the prior approval of the Dean of Students, which is also not proven to be popular, but is also proven to be essential. We have had, for example, a number of students early on that went down to a frat party, University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, the first or second weekend of school being here. And then 48 hours later, Alabama announced they had 500 coronavirus cases on campus. By the end of the week, they had 1,000. So we told those students, you can't come back, not at least for 2 weeks, until we know your COVID is clear. And so, and the final thing is we've actually shortened the semester, and so we'll all be done just before Thanksgiving, November 20th. Now, notwithstanding all of this, this is not the semester anybody wanted. Got it. But I will tell you this, we are here. We are here performing our academic mission more so than a lot of other schools are. We are incredibly safe. We have not had a single student hospitalized. We haven't had a single faculty member infected. We've had, I think, less than a dozen or so confirmed infections. A higher number of people had to go into quarantine because of contact tracing and whatnot. And last count, our positivity rate was 0.12%. We didn't have a single positive student in the last weeks of testing. Those numbers are extraordinary. They just are. I mean, they're just absolutely extraordinary. And so what that tells us is that what we're doing is working. And so as we prepare to go into the fall or into the spring, we will reevaluate and see what we need to continue to do and not. And so I've told everyone here, like, look, I get it. I understand that it's a bummer. I know that you don't want to be this, but I promise you when this whole thing is over, we are going to have a party that makes Coachella look like a funeral. We will. But we got to get there first. And so I'm hopeful, quite frankly, that when all of our students go home for Thanksgiving and Christmas break and they're hanging out with all their buddies that have been doing Zoom college from their parents' basement next to their Barbie dolls and Hot Wheels toys all semester long, they'll realize how good they had it here and will be all that more enthusiastic about returning to the mountain in the spring.
It really is incredible and amazing to see how you have led the team to pull all this off. And I just think of in the future, there'll be like a case study about how this was handled. So thank you for all that. Our alumni are really interested in hearing about your time at the Naval Academy and your time as an ambassador. And can you share with us like maybe what that experience was like and what that brings to Sewanee, how the Naval Academy is like or unlike Sewanee, and you have a lot of connections through your experience as an ambassador and how that might play at your time here.
Sure. Well, when I was 14 years old, I decided I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I'm a child of the Cold War. I read all Tom Clancy novels. Jacksonville, my hometown, is a big Navy town. And I wanted to be like the men and women who I saw who were naval officers that I really looked up to. And so I decided that's what I was going to do. Everything I did in high school was dedicated to that purpose. And I was accepted into the Naval Academy in September of my senior year. When I went and did well. You know, there's a saying that the Naval Academy is a great place to be from. And I'm not so sure it's as much like that anymore. But the sense of it, right, is that running a marathon is not fun, but you're proud of it when you do it. And there are certain people who take that on, right? And that's what it was like. And to this day, I am enormously proud and grateful for having gone there. I learned a lot about leadership, and about, camaraderie, and about grit, and, as I say, the will to win through that experience. My classmates now are have extraordinary positions of responsibility all across the world. I have one classmate who's a sitting U.S. Senator, Todd Young, from Indiana. We have classmates, regrettably, that we've lost in combat in the wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. And quite frankly, one of the things that keeps me sane, that's the wrong choice of words, one of the things that I've relied upon as a mechanism of support during this process is a sort of a really core group, about 7 or 8 of my classmates and I get together for a Zoom cocktail about every other Friday. And they are serious patriots. I mean, one who's a Navy SEAL, who now is a CEO of a technology company, another who is a former ballistic submarine captain who runs a major testing facility, third who was a naval attaché multiple times in regions of the country and the world, and another who just does stuff that we don't talk about. And we're all in substantial positions of responsibility in various ways. And it's really helpful for me to kind of lean upon them and share stories with them and get their perspective.
Great, thank you. I've got one more question before we go into what I'm going to call the lightning round, where we're going to answer some questions that were submitted by alumni. But I don't think we've ever had a family with non-adult children living in Chen Hall. And so can you tell us about, you told us a little bit about your wife being a physician, but what are her plans once she's here, and how are your sons doing? I think they're 15 and 13.
Yeah. So my wife is doing an MBA. She started when we were in Washington at George Washington University, where I was before. She continued to work on it through the pandemic, which is insane. So she is finishing it now because, having been a practitioner for 15 years, she wants to pursue her life stream, which is to open a cancer hospital in her native Ethiopia. So she's doing the MBA portion to understand the business side of that project. And for her, quite frankly, it's relaxing relative to some of the really challenging clinical medicine that she was doing over the last couple of years, especially the last 6 months. Robel, my older son, wants to be an engineer. He's an almost Eagle Scout. So he just has his project to do, and then 1 or 2 merit badges more. He also, one of our professors, Catherine Caminero, is an acrobatics aviation instructor, and she's in the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame. So she took both my boys up for some acrobatics. They both loved it. My oldest son said it was the best thing in the world he's ever done. We are going to reinvigorate the Sewanee Airport, by the way, and resume active flying lessons and restart the Sewanee Flying Tigers Flying Club for our students to be able to take flying lessons here. Because it's, I mean, tell me another small liberal arts college that has its own airport, like 7 minutes from the center of campus. It's extraordinary. And so we're going to lean into that asset. My younger son, Reda, wants to be a stand-up comedian, like legit. And probably will do it. So he did, 6 semesters of improv before we left to come from Northern Virginia. There's this place called Imagination Stage, and at the end of this last class, which is taught by professional actors, they said, like, look, all these other 11, 12-year-olds, they're just having a good time, but your son, he could have a Netflix special like tomorrow. And so, like, you could throw him in a dumpster and he'd create a party that everybody would want to join. And so they're all adjusting to life here. They really enjoy the outdoors. St. Andrews, where they go, everyone's been really wonderful. And so the community has just generally been very embracing. So we appreciate that.
Right. We're so glad you guys are here. So now there's lots of questions that have been submitted, and I'm just going to start with this one. I'm going to throw it out there. You said I could ask you anything.
Yep.
are there any plans to change the name of the university?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I get asked all the time. Oh, this guy Brigetty, what's he going to do? He's going to change the name. He's going to call it Wakanda University. Like he's gonna build the Malcolm X Center for reparations and rebellion on the ruins of Rebels Rest. No, we are not changing the name of the University of the South on my watch. That said, we are going to change the meaning of the name, because we could either be the University of the Old South or the University of the New South. We cannot be both. And we will lean in to being the University of the New South, the South that is welcoming for everyone, the South that embraces the stories and celebrates the achievements of all who call this place home, a South that is honest about its history, and a South that plots its collective future together. And we at the University of the South want to be at the center of that.
Great. So since you've been here, you've seen the honor code signing and the Order of the Gown induction ceremony, which are two prime traditions here. Just what are your thoughts on those, and what maybe is your favorite tradition? You know, we've got a lot of them.
Yeah. Those are incredibly special traditions. And I really love obviously as someone who graduated from the Naval Academy, where we also have a very strong honor code, honor concept that continues to define my life, as well as the Order of the Gown and its roots back to Oxbridge. Those are wonderful traditions that we need to embrace and continue to extend. You know, one of the things that I found about people here with regard to the gown, like, you know, why do you even have this? You know, it's elitist, it's this and that. No, I mean, it's special, it's incredible, right? We should celebrate that and embrace it. And in fact, we're going to be starting some new ones. And so, so as a plug, give you a plug, I think it's October 27th. I think I'm going to check my calendar. I think that's right. We have a Sewanee debating club, apparently. The head of that club asked if, you know, I'd be willing to kind of do like a Zoom kind of debate with them on an issue of foreign. Just like, not only am I willing to do it, like we are so going to lean into this, because if you're not familiar, both Oxford and Cambridge have debating societies, which are called the Union, the Oxford Union, the Cambridge Union. In fact, I was invited to debate at the Oxford Union in January of 2019. One of the coolest things in the world I've ever done. Very nerdy, I admit, but it was awesome. It was fantastic. Black tie, candlelit, sort of like debate society. Like, you know what? We're going to do that here. So we are going to do a formal Oxbridge-style debate in Convocation Hall on October 27th. It will be live streamed. We'll be wearing our gowns. It will be both students and professors. And the debate topic is something like, resolve the United States should remain the preeminent leader of the world. Actually, let me make sure I actually got that date right. So you all won't say the Vice-Chancellor said it was the 27th. It is it might be the 22nd. Keep talking. I'll find it.
Awesome. And yes, I will make sure the alums know how to watch that live stream when we get that information. So next, I wanted you to tell what you think. I know it hasn't been like we all, what's the date?
27th, October 27th.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so the topic now I want to ask you about is Greek life.
Yeah.
Our campus has been one where we have actually continued to allow Greek activities to happen. But what have you noticed about Greek life, and what are your thoughts about it in the future?
Sure. Well, you know, you may or may not know this, but in the African American community, Greek life is huge. The so-called Divine Nine fraternities and sorority, and like that's like for life. It's not just you had a good time in college and whatever. I mean, it comes to define crucial aspects of your social life over years. We were not allowed to pledge fraternities at the Naval Academy. It was prohibited. So I didn't, but my father and all the men in my family are all A-Phi-A's, the same fraternity as Dr. Martin Luther King. My mother and all the women in my family are all AKAs, the same sorority as Kamala Harris. So I get it. I totally understand the value of the intergenerational links that Greek life provides. I am not amongst those who believe that Greek organizations need to go away. I have concerns, and they are not unlike the concerns that university presidents elsewhere have. Um, as I said, I have no issue with people having a good time responsibly in accordance with the law. And when those boundaries are broken, as is often the case amongst young adults, it is our job both to help them understand what the boundaries are and why, and depending on how far afield they go from those boundaries, to hold them accountable. Because they are not college kids, they are college adults. Young adults, absolutely. Immature or inexperienced, maybe. But the first rule of adulting 101 is that you are responsible for your actions in every circumstance. And if we are not sending that message repeatedly to all of our students in Greek life and outside of it, then we are doing them a profound disservice for life, in addition to harming our own institution. So I have spoken with all Greek presidents a couple of weeks ago, and I now have a weekly meeting with student leaders at Chen Hall every Friday at 2 o'clock, which includes the IFC and ISC presidents. And my view to them is like, look, I've got no issue, but from an outsider looking in who's trying to understand this campus, it seems to me that Greek organizations do two things. You have houses and you have parties. Maybe you do other things. It is not inherently obvious to me. And I know there is some public service that goes on, but let's be real. It is not the defining aspect of what Greek life is about. And so I challenge them. It's like, look, do more. I mean, you guys ought to be on the front lines of a number of issues in this campus. Like, you absolutely ought to be on the front lines addressing questions of sexual assault, in terms of both educating our students and putting a stand. So look, I mean, we are not about this. If that's what you want, or if that's what you think, like, you don't belong in our particular fraternity or sorority or whatever, right? You know, we hold ourselves with dignity and we treat each other with respect, period. One of the sorority presidents, Alexa Fultz, has created this organization called Stand Up Sewanee, in which they are going to have, I think, week after next, a Greek service week, in which all the Greek organizations are going to go and do frontline service, you know, in the dining hall, the ground staff, whatever, just as a means of showing the people that take care of our folks every day how much they actually really appreciate it. And I couldn't be prouder of them for that. And I hope that this is a tradition that continues. So that's, you know, my take broadly on Greek life.
Great. And I love that you're meeting with students weekly now and can really get a good feel for each other in that way. What do you think about athletics, COVID or not? How do you see it as a priority? And then what are the potential competitions that could happen in the spring?
I just met with the entire athletic staff this afternoon for a Zoom call at 1:30. Because I wanted to reinforce to them the message, same message I'm going to sort of give to you since you asked this. I'm a huge believer in the value of athletics as a general proposition in the context of an educational environment. At the Naval Academy, where I matriculated, everybody was required to do a sport, whether it was a varsity sport or a club sport or just or something in between. I was a fencer, so I fenced foil for most of my time at the Naval Academy. And this is, by the way, on top of all the other physical stuff you had to do. On top of our required PE classes, where we did everything from hand-to-hand combat and boxing to a lot of swimming. A lot of swimming, as you can imagine. And so I'm a huge believer in the value of sports, of developing individual character, of giving students a sense of place and rootedness in their studies. I love having student athletes because they tend to be more structured and focused. Not saying that you have to be structured, but you know, it kind of gives them a frame. And quite frankly, to be honest, I mean, a lot of the social pathologies that one sees amongst groups of young people, they're just lower among student athletes because they have to keep their bodies healthy and because their coaches are daily holding to account. as are their teammates. And that's a great thing. And it teaches you the will to win, which is important in so many aspects of life when you're confronted with challenges. Do not shrink from them, but you're going to continue to face them and overcome them. And so the good news for us in the midst of COVID is that we have found a way to stay open. So all of our athletic teams are practicing together, they're meeting with each other, but our athletic conference has decided that we are not going to do intercollegiate sports this fall. We have still not decided about the spring, although I will tell you from my perspective, the two most important things are testing and masking. And if we can't make those universal amongst all of our athletes, not all Sewanee athletes, all athletes against who we're going to compete, then I simply don't know how you can do it safely while the pandemic is still going. I also know that our athletic facilities are in dire need of reinvestment. We have an awful lot of old equipment. Quite frankly, we're trying to recruit students whose high school athletic facilities are often in better shapes than our facilities here. And I've given my word, and I mean it, to our team that when we have our next fundraising campaign, fundraising for our athletics program will be a top priority for it.
That's great news for a lot of people, I'm sure. Thank you for that. I'm keeping my eye on the clock, so I want to get these two topics out there. I have many other questions, but just to make sure we get these answered. Since you have been in place for 3-4 months, maybe, two of the hottest topics that maybe you've heard from alums the most on are the proposed drug and alcohol policy, and also the statement by the Board of Regents about Sewanee's history with race and slavery. And so can you just talk about those a little bit so our alums can hear it right from you?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm teasing. Of course I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's a big thing, both big things. Let me address both of them in turn, and then I'll sort of tell you an anecdote about how they're related. I mean, so coming in, the university has long had a zero tolerance policy with regard to drugs. It's been on the books for years. And in trying to adjudicate that policy, as well as adjudicating the policy with regard to drinking, I'd come to be informed that there were serious concerns that the way in which they were being applied, there were concerns within the student body that simply weren't being applied fairly and consistently. And so I talked with the regents very early on, because I'm one who believes that if you're going to make a dramatic change, the time to do it is when a new person starts. Also, crucially, I'm a leader who believes deeply and profoundly in accountability. I've told all of my team here that I will never throw you under the bus. I will never say, you know, gosh, we missed that target because Susan didn't do her job. No, it is all on me. If it's on me, then I have to be comfortable with the priorities and the direction that we've set. You can't have accountability without authority. And so I told the regents, like, look, we need to, if this is where we are, then we need actually an enforcement framework which says so. And so we put out on July 30th that when we say zero tolerance, we mean it. And here's what it's going to look like. For first drug offense, you'll be suspended. Second drug offense, you'll be expelled. Simple. And that'll be the case regardless. And so we put it out, interestingly, to very little fanfare. I mean, it went out to everybody and no one said anything. And then we had the first student come back to campus who had a bong and 3 grams of marijuana in plain sight. The police, cited him for it, and we suspended him. And the gates of hell opened wide. Oh my God. People lost their minds. And so by the end of that week, I went back to the regents and I said, look, notwithstanding what the existing policy is, it is clear that we do not have a philosophical consensus in our community about this. There are those who argued, we don't believe the data you are telling us, Vice Chancellor, which says that we have a drug and alcohol problem that is in any way out of proportion to anywhere else. Then there are those who disagreed with zero tolerance policies for a variety of reasons. Either they thought it was too harsh. One woman said, because zero tolerance is harsher, disproportionately hard on students on communities of color. How can we possibly expect to recruit Black students if we are telling them that we have a zero tolerance policy with regard to drugs? You can wrap your head around that for a minute. And then there are those who said, of course we do drugs. Of course we drink to excess all the time. We are college students. That's what we do. That's what Sewanee's about. And if you change that, you're going to be destroying what is good and great and true about this university. Honest to goodness, all across the board, which is not a sufficient basis for actually having a policy that's that clear. So I said, fine, here's what we need to do. We need to take a knee, take a moratorium. So we are two entities here at the university. In the first instance, we are the University of the South, which is primarily an educational institution. We are also the municipality of Sewanee in Franklin County, Tennessee, which is subject to the laws of the state. So from a perspective of a university, we are going to have a moratorium on all student conduct offenses for a misdemeanor drug and alcohol possession and use. So you could be 18 years old, drink a martini, and light up a joint in front of All Saints Chapel. And from the perspective of the university, we will not do anything until we have a revised policy, which we're going to be working on soon. But the laws of the state of Tennessee apply. And so if a police officer is walking by and sees you with your martini glass in your joint, you're going to get cited. And if you are, in your room and there's a Live Safe app because somebody is concerned of what's happening behind closed doors, and you have a 10-pound bag of marijuana and you want to claim that you just bought 10 pounds because it was cheaper that way at Costco, it's fine. Tell it to the judge. That's a felony, right? Simple. The laws of the state apply here as they do anywhere else. We have had 6 felony arrests of students in the first 6 weeks of school. 4 for felony amounts of drugs, 2 for DUIs right through the center of campus. It is a miracle they didn't kill anybody. And we've had a number of other students that have had multiple misdemeanors that frankly should have been a felony, but for technical reasons they weren't, because they've been driving off campus to secluded parts off the domain to have parties, wrecked their cars while drunk, and then walked away so they wouldn't get charged with a DUI. And so, because in the first instance, we have to keep everybody safe. Closely related to that, we're deeply concerned about the individual development of every individual student. And then we're also concerned about what this means for our collective life. It is clear that we have to have a serious conversation about this. Now, to the question of the statement, the historic statement that the board issued on September 8th, categorically repudiating our past Confederate ties and the white supremacist ideology in which they were based. The board spent all summer working on this. They issued it September 8th, and it was like crickets. It was basically a non-event, which was surprising to all of us. A couple of weeks after that, this is a true story, honest to God. Most of my stories are true. This is a true story, honest to goodness. So a couple of weeks after that, I was in a meeting with all the fraternity and sorority presidents. I said, explain this to me. The board put out this bold statement categorically repudiating our past, and no one says anything. But we issue an enforcement framework for our existing policy on drugs, and you all lose your mind. Not just you students, everybody. Help me understand this. And then one of the fraternity presidents, we'll tell you which one. One of the fraternity presidents, honest to goodness, looked me straight in the eye in the Zoom camera, was as earnest as he could be, and he said, well, Dr. Brigety, we actually thought that the university dealt with this whole Confederate stuff a long time ago. It doesn't really kind of affect our day-to-day. But the drug stuff, now that affects our daily life. And I was like, there you go. There you go. Proved it, encapsulated it. And so we just have to have a conversation about who we want to be, who we intend to be in this space, and what the philosophical basis for our approach going forward will be.
Great. Real quickly, business major.
Look, let me tell you what I think. First, all curricular issues it's one of the very few things in black and white that our faculty is responsible for as a matter of shared governance. I have heard the debates about business majors and not business majors. I've heard the arguments for, because we have students that want to study business. And if other students want to study business, why would we not honor their academic aspirations? There are those who are opposed who would say it's not a real liberal arts thing, so why would we do it? As you know, I was a former diplomat and former ambassador. So let me address this question with that background in mind. So recognizing the prerogative of the faculty on curricular matters. Personally, I am in favor of the creation of a business major for two reasons. The first is that it would honor the academic and professional aspirations of many of our students. That on its own should be enough reason for us to do it. And we know that because of the number of students that are already majoring in economics and finance, and they're doing minors in business and whatnot, so why would we not allow them to do that? The second is that the argument that business is not real liberal arts simply doesn't hold water for me. I mean, if that's the argument, then we should get rid of everything except for Latin, religion, and Euclidean geometry, right? We should just do those three and call it a day. If we're going to say we're only going to focus on the real liberal arts, because we already have a number of majors that are not real liberal arts, whether it be environmental sciences and forestry to pre-health to computer science. And so I don't fully understand the opposition to it. And I look forward to a productive and respectful exchange with our faculty on that matter.
Great, thank you. Someone has offered to leave their bow tie collection in their will to you. So can you tell people where you get your bow ties?
Oh, well, I buy almost all, well, there are three answers to that question. One, I buy almost all my suits and therefore most of my ties from Joseph A. Bank. I'm a Joseph A. Bank guy, I'm not a Brooks Brothers guy. It's just a thing, no disrespect to those who are, it's just me. Two, I get a fair number as gifts. So I am humbled by the offer of the gentleman. And third, there is a place called Bow Ties, BEAU ties.com in Vermont, which sells really snazzy bow tie and mask combinations. So I bought 3 of them, and I might buy some more, particularly as it looks like this pandemic's going to last a while.
Great. Got a few more. So everybody loves Sterling's on campus. What is your favorite thing to order there?
So I've been to Sterling's a couple of times. I'm kind of a coffee snob, I gotta say. I haven't always been that way, but my wife is Ethiopian, which is the birthplace of coffee, and so our house standards are pretty high. Typically, I don't go to Sterling's for the coffee. I'll go for a salad, and typically I'll go there on a lunch date with my wife. So it's because the menu is pretty healthy, and so I'll get whatever salad she orders me, and be grateful that she still wants me to be healthy.
And I do know there's been a sandwich named after you down in this village at the Blue Chair.
The luscious Reuben, and
luscious, no less.
And any plate to go along with it. I haven't had the temerity to actually put it on my car, so it's sitting on my desk.
Okay, what is your favorite place on campus, and what makes you the happiest here?
Good question, Senator. I'm an avid equestrian, principally dressage and fox hunting. It's the one thing I do that completely takes my mind off of everything. Claire Reisman, whom some of you may know, has become my riding partner, and most Saturdays or Sundays we'll go and do a trail ride on the domain. I have a standing Tuesday morning dressage lesson with our equestrian director, Karen Gordy, who's great. I had some back issues a few weeks ago, so I had to take a couple of weeks off, but they're resolved now, and so that's my favorite place.
I think I could have answered that. And then I think before we wrap up, we had so many alums express their gratitude for your leadership and just are excited about the future, but they've also asked, how can alumni help?
So I'm going to be honest. We'll get to all the other stuff that you would expect a president to say, right? In regard to, you know, fundraising, whatever else, yada, yada, right? There'll be time for that. To be honest, the thing that you could really help with is get active on social media. There are a lot of haters out there for reasons that I don't fully understand. And the reason this matters is that it begins to kind of create a narrative which shapes a lived reality that it's just not helpful. I mean, I'm more than happy, as you know, Susan and others know, I will take questions on all issues and all comers, and I'm happy to have respectful dialogue and debate. But if EQB really means something, then we have got to hold each other to account for respectful dialogue. And there's been some pretty ugly stuff as of late. And so I would encourage you to engage respectfully. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, thank you. You guys, this has been so much fun. And there are a lot of topics we didn't even touch on. So I may see if I can lure our Vice Chancellor to do another one of these in the future. But anyway, it's great to be with you this way. We miss seeing you all. We can't wait to invite you back to campus. And in the meantime, just stay safe. And we look forward to a time when we can be together. Do you have any closing words, Vice Chancellor?
Send us students. Send us great students. We are a great place, and we are going to be going from strength to strength. And you know, the Chinese have a saying that we plant the trees, but others enjoy the shade. So send us the next generation of our Sewanee family, and we look forward to having them on the mountain. Great.
Well, thank you, Vice Chancellor, for being with us tonight, and thank you to everyone else, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. Take care now. Bye-bye.